Hello, Qualitative Methods class. So I think that a lot of people have been asking questions about the final assignment, and so I just sort of wanted to walk through it with you all. That way everyone feels like they're sort of on the same page. And like they know how to do the assignments. So as I mentioned before, I'm taking this assignment. The final date possible that I can take it by is the 7th. So I need the memo and all your participation points by the 7th. And so here's the prompt. And so the sort of idea behind this is that qualitative methods is a lot about narrative and writing, so I made the final assignment you need to do a writing assignment. So the first first, before you start writing or outlining or anything, you're gonna have to pick one of each of the parts. So check off which examples of qualitative methods you'd want to do and which qualitative methods in practice you want to do. So you need to pick one of these checkboxes from each of the parts. So to give a little background, you would pick one of these qualitative excerpts, and they span from 1963 until like more recently. So Howard Becker is a classic qualitative example of the study of deviance, not necessarily crime. So this particular excerpt is about the dance musician and how they're sort of seen on the outskirts of the society, and Becker actually hung out with a bunch of dance musicians in Chicago and understood their cultural structures and whatnot. So that's an option that you can read. Then there's also an article by page, and if you can see that all of these different excerpts, of which you need to choose one, are in the qualitative research examples folder. So if you click on the folder, you'll see them all here. And each of them just a brief excerpt or quote on each of them. So Becker is right here. It's a PDF document. If you'd like to do that from the book Outsiders. And so you would read that. It's about 12 pages. Or you can choose Debt of Care, which if you click on the title also has a smaller article. I ask that you also skim the empirical paper, which like we talked about are usually more intensive than news articles. They're pretty descriptive and whatnot. And so this has two components of it. If you want to do the bail, there's this brief article that talks about sort of the background of bail and gives you a primer of that. And then it talks about how women are expected to care and are sort of targeted by bail bondsmen to pay bail. So you would read that and skim this. If that's the one you choose, remember you only need to choose one. Then there's also Dispatches from the Rap Wars by Forrest Stewart. And he talks about how YouTube and drill music affect sort of gang cliques in Chicago. And all of these findings are based off of people actually being in these spaces and doing qualitative observations. So that's why it's really important for you all to pick one. Then we have, these are sort of your 3 reading options if you'd like to read for that section. Or there's also 2 podcast/video options. So this podcast Flash video is by Whitney Tatula, who is also in our department, in the criminology department, and she looks at how she does visual criminology, which we sort of talked about, which is like looking, somehow incorporating photography into your analysis or data collection. So she provides a space for people who are addicted to methamphetamine in the rural South to take pictures that sort of represent that struggle to them, and sort of analyzes them and talks through them. So you can watch / listen to that podcast there. You need to watch it too because it has visual components to it. Or you can choose Give Methods a Chance, which is a podcast in which the PhD candidate does interviews in prison. So it gives you a sense of how sort of the struggles and challenges and also benefits of doing interviews in prisons. And so these are your options. So you have to choose one. As stated in the prompt, just choose one of these and read it or listen to it, sort of take it in. Then the second part is to pick either two positionality statements, which you can also find here. There's either Down and Out and Under Arrest, which is another Forrest Stewart excerpt, but it's from a different book, On Skid Row. And then there's a Gonzalez Van Clev excerpt on Crook County. And they both talk about their identities and their position in those spaces. So that's why they're called positionality statements. They're sort of talking about how others perceive themselves and like how that affects the data that they're getting. So you can either do that, or you can read one of those two, or you can pick the activity, which is meant to get you to understand how unstructured interviews work. And so you'd interview a family member, a classmate, a friend for 20 minutes, and the whole point of this activity is to practice active listening. So instead of, usually when we're in our daily lives, we're in conversations with people and we're saying our opinions, but this is sort of trying to push you to do the opposite of that. So like to create more anonymity with yourself and more reflection and active listening, and trying to get more conversation going from the person that you're interviewing. So you would do this for 20 minutes and then ask for feedback after your interview. So once you pick either one of these and one of these, then you get into the writing prompt of it. So this is a typo, it should say part 1. But depending on what you pick here, so let's say I pick to read the page excerpt, then I would answer questions about the page excerpt here in the first paragraph of my memo. And then in the second paragraph, which applies to part 2, whichever you pick, if you pick to read, which are the Stewart and Van Clev, then you would answer these questions for that part. If you picked to do the activity, then you would answer these questions for the activity. And then the final paragraph is to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the study you read or the activity you did. So this can be about strengths and weaknesses about qualitative methods more broadly, and then identifying what type of qualitative methods these were. So for example, Discipline and Punish podcast is visual criminology. This is structured interviewing. So sort of identifying what were the strengths and weaknesses in what you read or did, and trying to apply the terms validity, reliability, and generalizability. And this might be more of a challenging paragraph, so it doesn't need to be about both of them, but whichever way you think you can apply these terms, If you think you can apply it more to the activity you did, then apply it to that. If you think you can apply it more to the excerpt, then apply it to that. I just really want you guys to sort of challenge yourself in thinking about how to apply these characteristics, which we've been talking about, and which are applicable to any type of method, whether it be quantitative or qualitative, to what you engage with for this final assignment. So that's an explanation of how to do this particular assignment. It's going to be 3 paragraphs, like I said, so 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. Again, this portion applies to part 1, and this portion applies to part 2, and you would either answer just these questions if you read, or these questions if you did the activity. And then you would finally wrap up with talking about strengths and weaknesses of the study that you read or the activity that you did. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Like I said, can only take this till this 7. Alrighty.